Well, that could have gone better. I mean, Antonio Conte's Napoli Serie A debut, I know they played in the Cup, but it's a cup game that many people don't pay much attention to in the early rounds. But the first game that really mattered was the opening day of the Serie A season, away at local rivals Verona, and they lost 3-0 with a whimper in what has been a pretty poor summer off the field for Napoli in terms of getting players out, not renovating the squad as much as need be. Only one new signing started this game in Spinazzola, and many people still believing that a lot of the deadwood remains, especially within defence, the striker, Politano. This feels like a team that hasn't had enough done to it in terms of renovating the quality. Incoming Antonio Conte, we know the reputation he has. We know what he's done with Juventus, with Chelsea, with Inter Milan. And, Italian football and Antonio Conte feels like a match made in heaven. But there was something really concerning about this performance. And now, assuming that the business gets done in Napoli the way it should, that Osimhen leaves and they get Lukaku and they get Billy Gilmore and they get David Neres and they sort out the defence, which badly needs it. Buongiorno, who has been signed in the summer, was injured for the game and couldn't play. But this felt like a performance from a team in like February, March, when you feel like the manager's one bad loss away from getting sacked. Not to say downing tools, because I always feel like that's a bit of an easy thing to say from the outside, and it's a bit of a bloke in the pub type opinion. But it just felt wrong. It felt so bad for a first game of the season. Like, I've seen similar games from United when we start seasons off, and that's not a good thing. Like, devoid of any real quality, devoid of any real togetherness, defensive solidity, which is something you commonly associate with Antonio Conte teams. I had nothing that you could be somewhat encouraged about if you're a Napoli fan watching this. And I'm going to go over the on the ball first. Now, when Napoli would originally build up, they would build up in a four at the back, as Mazakai would move further up the field in the right wing back position. I hope I'm saying that correctly. He's not a player I'm overly familiar with. Di Lorenzo would move into his more natural right back position, and the rest of the back three would remain as you'd expect. Anguissa and Lobotka showing for the ball. Merritt would form a part of the build up, but because Verona weren't looking to press on the ball, they were dropping off. They were remaining compact at their five at the back and the four in midfield. Napoli could get the ball up the pitch quickly, and they generally favour the right side on build-up. As a result, you'd see Spinazzola slowly start moving up the field to get back into his natural left-back position, and as a result, Napoli could move up the pitch if I just do that now. Now, Napoli would move into their 3-2-4-1 attacking shape, lopsided, as Di Lorenzo would form a more natural right-back position, with the rest of the back two remaining as such. Anguissa and Lobotka would narrow up and show for the ball a lot more to bring the Verona midfield up, to press them onto them and create passing lanes into more forward players. And Napoli could attack in a multiple amount of ways, one of which, and I would say is least successful and really highlights Napoli's need for a striker, would be Rachmani or whoever, or maybe Anguissa or Lobotka getting on the ball here to whip balls round into the side for Simeone to hold up, play with his back to goal and bring others into play. This is not getting the best out of Gio Simeone's qualities. He is not that. I don't think he's Napoli level anyway, but he's also not that striker in an Antonio Conte three at the back system. Easily lost out on his duels every time with Coppola or Freze, whoever he'd move on to, and was just so easily outmuscled every time. And you can see why he's so desperate to have Lukaku in this team, because that's Lukaku's game, is pinning a centre back, using his body to shield the ball and bringing others into play. It very quickly became apparent they had to find another way of attacking. One of which, and they did try and progress it in a more technical way, that was by getting Lobotka to drop into the defensive line to spread the back four a bit further apart. Anguissa was the sole player in between that defence and attack line. It also gave a bit more license for maybe Politano to drop on the ball here and help progress it and play through the Verona shape. Kvaratskhelia would also look for the ball, and he was given a bit of a free roam within this system, as we commonly see him on the left-hand side for Napoli, which is where he's been over the last couple of years. He played as a left 10, which I can see why, because he's done that for Georgia and he's done it very well. But I feel like you want him outside moving inwards as opposed to stationary staying inwards, given a bit of a free roll. And he had a couple of moments, created a couple of openings, had a good chance at the end of the half, which caused him to go off with a concussion substitute, I believe. And he showed glimpses of his quality and his dribbling in tight situations. The only issue is nobody was playing off of him. Only a couple of times when Anguissa made a forward run was he able to link up with players. But other than that, it was him getting the ball, waiting for a run from Simeone, from Politano, from Spinazzola that never really came. And as a result, it felt like he had to do it on his own, and it just broke down very easily. Another way that they would build up is through that right hand side, and that would be with wide overloads to try and get crossing opportunities in. So Di Lorenzo getting the ball here would play it up to Mazzacai or Politano, and you'd get Di Lorenzo on an overlapping run to try and receive it down the byline. And they would use that three on that right hand side to create openings. And this three would be very fluid in this area. They rotate positions. They try and disrupt Verona's shape to get into decent crossing opportunities. Di Lorenzo especially got a good number of crosses in. We know he's got a good, wonderful right foot, but not a real target to aim for in the box as Simeone, Kvaratskhelia, and Spinazzola weren't arriving into the box correctly. The only one who was getting into the box to get into good scoring opportunities was Anguissa, who could have arguably on another day had a hat trick, making late runs from deep, powerful runs to get on the end of things, runs to the edge of the box to receive cutbacks. The only one giving that right hand side a bit of quality to work with. And other than that, it was fairly basic in their approach and their attacking play from Napoli. You know, they tried to go through the middle, it didn't work. And with those wide overloads on the right hand side, it was only really Anguissa they had to hit with their crosses. And you get Kvaratskhelia coming in a little bit more narrow as well, using that free roll to try and get on the ball and create. The ball very rarely came to him though, and Spinazzola was holding the width on the left hand side, but he didn't have that same relationship with the wide centre back as Juan Jesus isn't athletic and mobile enough to bring the ball forward and contribute to overlap and runs. It's not his game. As a result, they couldn't break the shape down. Verona defended really well in their structure and their unit, and Napoli firing blanks and the substitutions didn't help either. But what were they like off the ball? So there was a multitude of defensive issues, tactically and with the personnel. So they didn't really press a lot from goal kicks as Verona went very long. So Napoli were constantly anticipating the long ball where they could then challenge and potentially win the aerial 50-50s and, restart their attacking play. The only issue is Verona went very narrow and central with their goal kick straight to Tengstet up front. The biggest issue was Rachmani, I think, lost just about every header he went up for. He was so poor in those aerial, middle of the pitch, 50-50 duels, which your middle centre back and a back three should be winning every time. And he was so unsuccessful at points, it was not even funny. I can't remember him winning a single aerial duel. He was poor all game and got done from the most basic of situation when you're a centre back. They did then, as the game went on, when they grew in confidence a bit, Verona tried to play out from the back. And again, this was an issue. As Napoli would match the back three with the front three, they'd go off and press. One of the midfielders would generally look to drop in and help receive the ball and progress the play. And it would be Serda and his substitution who came on from after he went off with an injury in the first half. I forget his name, I apologise. Which would drag Anguissa up a little bit. And as a result, this left Stanislav Lobotka in acres of space in the midfield, as typically Antonio Conte wide centre backs will look to press up into this area here if the wide 10 drops in and try and prevent that centre of the pitch from becoming exposed. Di Lorenzo didn't really do it as much. He was the one that did on the occasion, but again, not as frequent as you want your wide centre back to do. And Juan Jesus does not want to be pulled into this position. For those of you who don't know, he lacks so much mobility. He's had a lot of injuries, which have contributed to it. But the moment you have him pushed into space that he's got to try and retreat back into is a recipe for disaster. So those half space areas were exposed, and leaving Lobotka in the middle of the pitch on his own did not help that. And as a result, when that initial press was beaten, that back five had to retreat and retreat quick because they weren't ready to engage. The only time they try and do that with the wide centre backs and press and try and win the ball back higher up is if Verona tried to build around the outside, and Lazovic could then receive it a little bit deeper, which puts Mazzacai onto him. Livramento coming short to receive the ball. Di Lorenzo would follow suit, but those are a bit low risk areas. But they wouldn't do it in the centre of the pitch, and it would only become in those areas. And Verona could attack the centre of the pitch because with that midfield setup, they had so much space. And then, as I said, Napoli would end up getting pushed back. There were many issues with Napoli's defensive structure, especially within transition, and that was. Oh, I don't even know where to go first because both of them are pretty bad. The wing backs lacked so much athleticism. That Mazzacai, it's the first game I've ever seen him play. I will find it hard to think that he's going to play a worse game than he did against Verona at the weekend. if he plays a worse game than that all season, then Jesus Christ, sell him there and then. Because on the ball, dreadful. It felt like he couldn't string a pass together. Everything went out for a throw or a goal kick. Defensively, for a wing back, you need to have a level of mobility. He looked so sluggish. It was untrue. And Spinazzola, with his injuries and his issues, that transitional play is hard. He doesn't have that spring to get back and up and down the pitch as quickly. The wide areas were constantly exposed, and it left a back three that's not mobile enough at the best of times anyway, with a lot more space to cover. Another issue is the midfield two. In the break and with the space they had to cover, they got easily pulled apart by the player on the ball. So let's just say if the wide centre back was coming into this area here, and even if the back five got in space, then you'd have Lobotka coming for the ball, you'd have Duda moving into space, Serdar and Yaranguisa in a 2-on-1 situation to try and sort that out. And let's just say if a player showed deep for the ball here, there was more players for him to deal with that he was just going to struggle with in a simple mathematical equation. Not helped at all were Lobotka and Anguissa by Kvaratskhelia and then Raspadori when he came on for him, and Politano not doing their jobs, tracking back and giving them a bit of coverage in the wide areas a lot. So let's just push them a little bit further back. On the edge of the box, in their midfield too, they were so outnumbered and they could get so easily pulled apart. Again, if Lobotka came close and came narrow and came short to try and prevent the easy pass, if that player was beaten, if Verona just pulled off a quick little move to move it into the centre of the pitch, then you'd have Anguissa caught in between many players, and that Napoli defensive unit, as I was saying before, aren't ready to jump and engage. Juan Jesus as well in this left centre back position. In terms of his positioning in the box and his distances between his centre backs and his full backs, all over the place. All over the place. There were points where he was coming so unnecessarily short, covering Spinazzola down the width of the pitch to the byline when nobody was making an overlapping run. And at points, and especially for the first goal, he was left 2-on-1 and really struggled to contend with it, as you would. But even still, his positioning, he's just always giving up space at some point, taking up positions where you're just exposing your partner and giving space for someone to attack. All over the place. So individually poor, but I've seen Conte set up teams better than this in England and in Italy before. And for an elite level coach, this was really disappointing on his behalf. Of course, as the window ends and you think Napoli will sign and they should sign, it could get better. But based on this performance, they're on to nothing more than a mid-table season again. But let me know what you guys think. Any Napoli fans randomly watching this video, I'd love to hear your thoughts. I'd love to hear what you think about Conte going forward. And if you think he's the right man. Cheers for watching, lads. In a bit.